Hi friends, I'm Sean, the Modern Yeoman, and I'll be honest with you, I did not get a lot of sleep last night, so if I miss a beat or two in today's presentation, now you know why. Now you might be wondering what caused me to lose sleep, and the answer is we experienced a pretty intense rainstorm last night. In fact, I don't think rainstorm is the correct term. Deluge or gully washer is probably more appropriate. The heavens opened up, and while inches of rain and potential flash flooding is one thing to be concerned about, we also lost power at about 2:30 or 3 in the morning, which led me to think about the sump pump in my crawl space. Now, if the sump pump, which is electrically powered, goes out, well, then our crawl space floods. Long story short, after fooling around with the generator in the mud and the intense rain at 3:30 in the morning, the electricity did finally come back on and everything ended well. Our crawl space is not flooded. But all of this has led me to reflect on two of my least favorite words in the English language, and that's drainage issues. Those of you that have been following along with our channel know that we do have some drainage issues here, especially on our home acre where we intend to do a lot of gardening and planting in the next year. There is a dry creek back in our woods that fills up whenever it rains, kind of borders our back pasture acreage, but we're not as concerned with that right now because we don't have any long-term planting or gardening goals for it. But we do here on our home acre, and so we've been watching some of these areas with concern, especially this area right here where there used to be an above-ground pool. The folks that lived here previously had an above-ground pool there, and so it's created kind of a depression bowl-like area that just ponds up with even just a little bit of rain. In addition, we've been keeping our eye on the area where we have the silage tarp now, where we're going to put our garden. And of all the places on our home acre, this seems to be the most well-drained, thankfully, which is why we ended up choosing this spot for the gardening. But that doesn't mean I don't want to take care of the ponding issues as they arise. And so I've been researching different methods for taking care of standing water and pooling on your land. And one thing that's come up for me a couple times now is something that's called swales, or in layman's term, just a drainage ditch. So without knowing too much about it, I decided that I'm going to experiment today and just dig a couple of ditches here out of this pond towards the slope and see if it can help drain this little pond, this pool that I've got going on here. There's not much to say other than let's just start digging and see what happens. Now, in case you haven't figured it out by now, let me make it very clear to you. I'm in no way a professional at this. I'm not a landscaper. I don't have a degree in permaculture. I'm just a rookie homesteader trying things out. This whole experiment right here is exactly that, an experiment that I thought would be worth filming and taking you along the ride for. With that little disclaimer out of the way, why don't I show you what I'm going to do? So this pond pool thing behind me is formed essentially because there's a depression bowl shape in the ground here. There's nowhere for the water to go once it starts collecting. So my mission today is to simply find the shortest distance between this pond and the slope over here and just dig a trench between those 2 points. Ideally, the water that's here in the pond will flow out to the slope and distribute itself a lot more evenly over the ground here on the slope. That's the ideal though. I have no idea what's going to happen, so let's start digging and see what happens. All right, so this seems like a pretty good candidate for my trench line right here. The pool, I don't know if you can see it from here, but it starts right there and the slope begins right by where my feet are right now. So it's a fairly short distance from the pool to here, and I'm just going to start digging. One thing I should note here is that this is a fairly low-risk endeavor for me. None of the trenches that I'm going to dig are going to be any more than 10 feet or so, and the worst thing that can happen is this doesn't work and I just need to pile the dirt back in. We don't necessarily plan on planting or gardening in this particular spot right now, so for me this is just a way to experiment, try something out. So I haven't even gotten to the area where the pool is yet, but already you can see the water starting to collect in my ditch here. I need to flatten some of this out, lower it just a bit, but it's kind of surprising that the water's already started filling into this trench.
Et songe bien, oui, songe combattant, que le noir te regarde, et que l'amour t'attend, toréador.
Okay, so I've essentially created one long artery trench that shoots out to the slope on either side of this basin. The good news is that this basin is pretty much empty of water. There's very little standing water left in the actual bowl area itself. Most of it's gone to this artery. However, the issue lies in the fact that there's a lot of this water just sitting level in the artery in the middle of it. So while the water is confined to the artery here, the trench, there's parts in the middle that aren't flowing to either side, the offshoots to the slope. So I may just need to try digging a little further down on those slopes to help encourage the water pressure to move it out towards the ends of the trench. I'm going to give it a shot. I don't think it's working. Actually, let me amend that slightly. It's kind of working, but I'm disappointed. This didn't turn out the way that I thought it would. On the one hand, the good thing is that all the standing water that was here is pretty much gone. There's no longer a pool. However, the water that is left is just in this kind of muddy stream that runs through the middle of this bowl-like depression area. I envisioned all of the water running off onto the slope. Most of the water did, but not all of it. And so I'm left with this kind of ugly brown stream in the middle of this patch right here, along with mounds of dirt that I dug up. So in the end, what's uglier? A little pond and standing water in my yard, or this monstrosity of dug up earth and sand and clay and gravel and rock and a brown little stream running through the middle of it all? What's worse? And honestly, I don't know what I exactly envisioned here. I think what I was planning on doing was filling this trench with gravel or a French drain system like I did in an earlier project, and covering it back up with dirt and forming like a French drain system. I don't know if I'm going to do that now. And in all honesty, I don't know what I'm going to do here. I may just dig the trench back in, refill it with all this dirt, and walk back home with my tail in between my legs. I don't know. It goes to show you that not every experiment is going to turn out the way you expect it to. And this is one of those situations. I really thought this would look better than it does. Right now, I think it looks a lot worse than it did when I started. Granted, that pool is gone, that little pond is gone, but at what cost? What have I got here instead? Well, I think it's fair to say that this little experiment was definitely not a success. It wasn't a straight up failure either. I was able to drain that standing water, but it certainly wasn't what I was going for. After thinking it over yesterday, I ended up filling in the trench that I made and feeling pretty sheepish the rest of the day. All that mud and dirt and sweat for nothing. Well, I won't say nothing. I did learn a few things. You know, last night and this morning I was real close to deleting all of this footage and counting this episode as a wash. moving on to something else. But I remember in acknowledgement I made a few episodes ago that my homesteading journey isn't only about the successes, it's also about the failures as well. And as such, I think it's only fair to you, the viewer, to not only see the victories here on the homestead, but also the losses as well, the failed experiments. Ultimately, I'm not sure what I'm going to do about my drainage issue out there, but that's something I'll figure out in time. In the meantime, I've got a lot of work to do and a lot of bona fide successes under my belt. I'm always kind of squeamish about drawing pat cliches from my experiences, but in this case, the old bromide is true. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I took the L here and fully intend on learning from it. Anyways, until next time, thanks for watching and stay dry out there.